Yeah, I think it's very much like the one I just did, because my first entrepreneurial journey, I was so stressed. I went through an anxiety crisis. I was so focused on the business that I was shutting down my relationship with my kids that were the most important thing for me at the time. So I was, every time, for example, my baby born was sleeping, grabbed my laptop and started working. I didn't really need to be working. I was looking for something to do, right? Because I thought that I had to, because I was entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs work all the time. So I think the lesson would be to seek balance and having moments of introspection and enjoying the life as a whole. That will give you perspective, that will help you a lot as an entrepreneur. So enjoying the whole journey, trying to have some balance and enjoying life, because it doesn't come back, and actually it goes by very fast. So it doesn't make sense not to enjoy.
Fernando, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Burak. Thank you for having me.
We are going to talk about a postmortem today. What originally inspired to start a startup, a venture? What problem were you trying to solve?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me again. I'm really grateful for you. You were great as an investor, although you didn't invest in us. You provided such rich feedback that we never had and never have received from any other investor so far. So I'm really thankful, and I think you're an example to be followed by other investors. Well, a quick story. I sold my first startup in 2020, so 4 years ago, more or less, a bit less. And then I was in an earner period and looking for somewhat of a purpose, somewhat of a meaning, or something that would speak to me, right? And we were in the middle of the pandemic, so people were all the time in Zoom calls and trying to align themselves. So when we looked at that, I saw a lot of time being spent and in without meaning, right? In useless hours and of alignments and everything. At the same time, everybody in the world was looking for meaning. Right? We are experiencing some apocalyptic condition we never faced before in our lives, at least, right? So everybody was searching for meaning. So it was not only my search, I think, but that contrast was very strong. What I found, I haven't found a purpose at the time, but I reinforced belief that I have, that I have to make the best use of my time and potential. I really believe that humans have a huge potential. If you think about humans that made a lot of difference in the world, think of a world without Steve Jobs, or without, let's say, Bonavox or Freddie Mercury, or other great people that left a big impact, the Beatles. So every individual may make a huge impact in the world. And we are not conscious about that, and we are not using this potential. So this was the seed of what gave birth to Pannacotta, and it became the purpose of the company, right? So we wanted to help people to make the best use of their time and their potential. And then we set ourselves to discover how. That's how it started.
Before deep delve about the Pannacotta and also the story, should you also give your background? So
Okay.
the first startup, and how did you become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. What we call here production engineers. It's a formation that gives us a lot of business and a lot of technical background. Already when I graduated, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Right? My graduation speech was about entrepreneurship, and I wanted to create a company. And 2 years later, I created a consulting company. That's what I knew how to do, because in the beginning I was a consultant. And then so and it didn't work out really well, actually, because we were too young and we had no networking, and it was hard to sell. So, but it was my first entrepreneurial experience, and I also decided to shut it down. And I joined a bigger consulting company, actually a tech company. So I started my career at Accenture, then I quit, created my first consulting company, and then I joined a tech company from Brazil called Totus that was creating a consulting arm. So my career in consulting was about 10 years, and then I was invited to run for Totus, the corporate venture capital arm. We call it Totus Ventures, and then a bit later also the M&A division. So I spent some years acquiring companies, tech companies, investing in tech companies. So I was at the other side of the table already, but I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? So it was like a dream that was stored for a while, and I was feeling like okay, time's going by, and in the end, I will regret not taking this step and not creating a company. And I didn't want to make consulting again, but I wanted to create a tech company. And I started to have a few ideas of what, because I was talking to hundreds of entrepreneurs, acquiring some of them, their companies, and investing in some of them. And I got both the inspiration and the will to do it. Because curiously, my first son was about to be born. And that gave me a bit more pressure, because in the end, I felt that every month my risk perception would grow exponentially, and that will make me regret not taking this decision. So I talked to my wife, and we agreed that we could make it a good timing. And so I took this step. So the inspiration for the first company was bringing technology from e-commerce to physical consumption, which was a very the physical retail was a huge market, and e-commerce was a tiny fraction, about 3% of these retail markets, and it had so much more technology to change the consumer experience that it didn't make sense. So that was the calling. But in the end, we ended focusing on food service, and more specifically in food courts. So changing the food court experience to order and pay, and then so you do order and pay from an app platform, a marketplace, and then the restaurant will notify you when the order was ready for pickup, and you would take it out.
When was it? The year?
We started that in 10 years ago, so it's 2014,
Okay.
and we sold it in 2020 during the pandemic. It was a tough time, actually, because during the pandemic, all the food courts were closed. We were innovating like crazy, trying to pivot, and we were already in the middle of an M&A deal, and we managed to close this deal in the same conditions that we were already negotiating, because it still made sense for both sides.
So it was a successful startup before, this experience, I think.
Yeah, it was a full cycle, right? So we returned the money for the investor, so it was successful, but I couldn't see it this way at that time. And that was a part of what made me start the journey again, right? So I felt, well, I didn't get close to what my ambitions were. And so I want to do it again. And this time I'm going to go do it big. So Pannacotta started with a big purpose, like helping everybody make the best use of their time and their potential, right? It's really big. And I think that's a problem that I felt that's made the journey much harder for Pannacotta.
What originally inspired you to start the Pannacotta, and what problem were you trying to solve?
Okay, so I had just sold my first company, right? So I was in an earnout period for 2 years almost, and then I was looking for what my next step would be and what was my purpose, right? And I couldn't really find a purpose, but I reinforced a belief that I had, that I have to make the best use of my time and my potential. And I really believe that the human potential is enormous. That humans may leave a very big legacy in the world. So, for example, think of humans which left a big legacy, like Steve Jobs, or even musicians like Freddie Mercury. And the world will be very different without, and the Beatles and everything. So the inspiration was, okay, let's create something to help people make the best use of their time and the potential. And at the time, we were in the middle of the pandemic, so people were wasting a lot of time in Zoom calls, trying to get a line, also trying to get their lives right in the confinement of their homes, right? So it was something that spoke to us and also to the rest of the world. This was an inspiration.
Should you tell me about the Pannacotta? What problem were you solving as a product?
So initially, our understanding was more focused on the time and trying to connect the time to the goals. What we thought was, okay, purpose or goals, or so you should use your time more specifically toward your goals, right? So what we created and how we found out, we started a discovery process with more than 100 interviews, in which we got to a solution that would connect to your calendar, and then you'd state your goals and inside the calendar without leaving the calendar, and then you would connect the way you were using your time to these goals. But that spoke up to some people, right? But people have a very hard time defining even their goals. And when they think of their time, this connection isn't so easy, right? So thinking, okay, I have this meeting, and this meeting is helping me with this very strategic goal, whether it's a business goal or a life goal, it's hard. This was the first iteration of our product and the shape it took.
As far as I remember, the productivity tool integrated with calendar for efficient team coordination as a summary of your product in Pannacotta.
Yeah, the first iteration was that we decided that we wanted to do something that is B2B, right? Also because of my my experience with B2B2C, I didn't want to do B2C because I think it's very hard. Marketing CAC is very high, so it's a hard business. So we were trying to take this purpose into a more business direction. So in the end, we were trying to make it a collaboration tool inside the calendar, a collaboration platform inside the calendar to help share goals and connect everybody's times to the company's goals.
How did you validate, in this startup, that there was a demand for your product? Did you only do the surveys, or did you also talk with the customers?
We talked a lot to a lot of customers. In the very early days, I invited Luisa, my co-founder, to join me. Luisa had founded a UX consulting company. So she's a designer and she's the master in what she does. And she actually helped me in my first startup to figure out that the important thing was the customers' opinions, that my opinion and my will doesn't count and isn't important to define where the product should go. So we decided to start with a vision. Okay, that we want to solve this big problem, but the shape of the product was given by more than 100 interviews. So talking to customers, first understanding their pains deeply, and then in the second phase, showing them a design prototype and getting feedback, and then later showing them a working prototype, and then later showing them the product and onboarding them and getting feedback. So
how did you handle fundraising and also pitching to investors this time? If you compare with the first one, did you also raise in this startup?
Yeah, at Pannacotta we ended up raising 250K USD. I had learned a lot about funding from the first experience, so we decided to raise from angels first. And I decided that I wanted angels that would really be understanding and helpful. And so I was very selective with these angels. And in the end, we raised mostly from founders, some exited founders and other founders that are already supporting other founders as angel investors. This was the first phase, and it helped us a lot. We didn't want to start without any funding and bootstrap, because I spent my first cycle without a salary for 6 years. And that was very destructive for me and for my family and everything. So I said to myself, okay, I may have a small salary, but we have to have some funding so we can pay us a little bit, and then we can start a business so without so many worries. So we raised this amount so that we could have some runway. The costs of the company were not so relevant. So that's it. We raised from angels a bit before we actually started building. So in the beginning was just me and Luisa, both more of business people. And then we hired the tech people later. And after that, Juliano, our co-founder, joined as CTO.
How many people were in the team? How many co-founders?
3 co-founders.
And all the team was 3 co-founders, or did you have also other team members?
We hired 1 developer at some point, and we worked with a few freelancers along the way.
What are some mistakes or failures in the early days of this product now, Pannacotta?
Well, in the early days, I had learned also one thing that I learned from my first cycle, and some things I learned a lot from the Latitude community, which I was part of. and I get to know about no code and low code and ways to make things faster. So when we decided, okay, that this is what we're going to build, and we had a design prototype, I went to a no code specialist and showed it to him. And he said, wow. And I asked, okay, what app should I use? What no code tool should I use to develop this? And he said, well, I think you're going to have to hire a freelancer. And then that's what I did, right? So we ended up coding to get the first product out. And I think that was a mistake. At that moment, I should have gone back to Luisa and said, Luisa, we must design something that we can do with no code to validate it. Because in the end, when you start coding, it may take a lot of time, right? And so we took like 6 months to have a working version that was really usable. When you start from scratch and say, okay, we have to code something, hard code, especially something that is integrated in the calendar. So it was already a bit complex.
What were the biggest challenges you faced trying to build Pannacotta then?
So we took a lot of time, and then to develop this first version, and then we took some this time to figure out that the calendar wasn't a good place to collaborate. So it's a very personal tool you use to organize your own time, etc. But it's not really a collaboration tool. So for example, the experience, if you'd share a goal from inside the calendar with someone that is not a user of the platform, still you would have to send an email to this user and invite him to download a Chrome extension to connect to his calendar. So a lot of friction. And then we decided to pivot from this understanding. But the problem is we took a lot of time to get to this point because we couldn't validate it faster without code done that different.
If there were a I mean, if one of your co-founders were coder or more experienced, let's say, engineer, will it be different?
No, I don't think so. Actually, our CTO, it took a few months for him to join, but in the end, what we thought was very simple. When you're a business person or a product person, you think that, okay, it would be really simple to code that, right? And in the end, it's always complex. If you're really using coding, it is complex. What you can do today with generative AI and no code is much, much faster. And then we learned that. So I don't think it would be different. At that time, we didn't have ChatGPT and anything. What we could have done different was to use more no codes and try to get to the market with a solution that didn't use codes, so we could validate and fail faster, get to this conclusion faster with the first iteration of the product, which, by the way, is what we did in the second iteration.
Did you see the huge demand for this solution? Did you see the product market fit in your iterations?
We couldn't reach product market fit, but everybody we showed and we talked about the concept and we showed the product was very interested, was very energetic about it. Okay, that's really interesting. That would be very helpful. Of course, getting people to download and try and give you feedback is harder than this early interest. But we saw a lot of interest, and then they gave us energy to keep building and delivering. So, and this product got a few hundred users. So it was not paid yet. So it was just a free version. We were starting to see some traction. So we were energized by it until you found these challenges.
So how did you maintain your resilience through the tough times? Because it's a 2 years journey in.
Yeah, well, it is challenging, right? It's stressful, and we ended up having to pivot, right? And it was hard, but so there were many hard times. And during my first journey, I was very stressed all the time. During the second journey, I had gained a lot of consciousness, and what changed in the process from one to the other was I started doing a lot of meditation. I always exercise a lot, but I think my level of consciousness increased when I took the decision to start a new entrepreneurial cycle. I was very aware of the decision I was taking and what I was getting into and how stressful it would be. So when it got stressful, I used to say, I looked at the mirror and said, you sign up for this, right? And that reminded me that, okay, really, I decided to be an entrepreneur. I know what it means and how stressful it is. And how it's some kind of emotion that I like, right? So even the stressful moments, when I remind me of that, I said to myself, okay, I signed up for this, and I quite almost could enjoy the stressful moments as challenging moments that, okay, I have to overcome, because in the end, if you're entrepreneurs, because you like challenges, and you should enjoy the good part of these moments. Of course, it's stressful, but if you're enjoying the challenge, okay, I have a challenge here, and then if you give 2 steps back, that's what consciousness help you, and meditation may help you. Because if you take a step back and you look at yourself, you observe yourself, and you see a person trying to overcome a challenge, that makes it much more interesting and much less stressful.
What personal sacrifices did you have made as a founder during this experience?
I always thought of the trade-offs. It's okay, I'm doing this instead of what? During the first entrepreneurial cycle, as I had just left my position as an executive, I thought about how much money I was leaving on the table. Okay, how much money would I be making as an executive in the market? Right. But then when I decided, okay, I am an entrepreneur, it's very, very hard for me to think of being an executive again. So I started comparing to what else should I be doing or could I be doing that would have more value, or would maximize the use of my potential or what I'm giving to the world. So I think and in terms of balance, the company was born from a perspective that, okay, we have to live more balanced lives. So I wasn't sacrificing my time with family and my dedication to my kids and my wife and everything. Of course, I was working hard at the company, but what I was sacrificing was, okay, maybe I could be doing something else and I would be more successful in less time, right? And thinking about this, I don't know what now. Maybe I'll figure out, right? I was sacrificing something, which I don't know what. So in the end, how do you live with it? You have to think that you're learning, right? So when you think of this perspective of a failure, I create a company, and other people joined this company, and the company failed. It was not me that failed, right? So sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. This time I've learned, and I've learned a lot. Actually, it was a big victory. For everything I've learned in this journey was a big victory for me. Unfortunately, for the company, for my own investment and for my investors, the company did fail. But I've learned a lot. I hope my investors learned from this experience as well, and my co-founders, of course, they did.
How did you
Sorry.
deliver the news to the team and investors and users?
Yeah, the team at the time, we decided to shut it down. The team was reduced to just the co-founders, and we kind of took this decision together. We had pivoted. Just a quick story about our pivot. We had decided to use AI to solve the same problem, right? And every consumer we interviewed told us, okay, I don't want a new tool, I don't want a new browser tab. So we decided this time we would build a tool inside the Slack, right? Using the conversational capability that generative AI had given us. And this was also hard. So it wasn't tractioning. It was a good idea. It was a good concept. It spoke a lot to the zeitgeist, but it was very challenging. And at some points, we were very low energy. We had an offsite meeting, and it was very low energy. So we weren't excited about what we were building, what the path it took. We didn't intend to create a productivity tool in the end, right? So it was something higher maybe than that. And then we look at each other and ask ourselves, okay, do you really want to do this? Right? And we slept with this, and then we decided, okay, I think we should pause, because we are in the middle of a fundraising, and we are fundraising to build something we don't really believe, and that the market is responding that there isn't a big demand for that, right? So we first decided to pause, just among us, and we communicated our investors, okay, we are pausing. and we stop having salaries because we don't know for how long we're pausing, and that means we will have to occupy our time with some other tasks, and maybe while we look for other possibilities for the company. And then 1 or 2 months later, we thought to ourselves, okay, we aren't finding a path, and maybe it's better and more honest with us and with our investors to decide to shut it down, give back the money that is left, and maybe in the future we will find another path, either to solve the same problem or another problem, and then we can invite these investors back to this new journey.
What is the psychology of closing down that you have worked hard to build? Yes.
Yeah, it's hard. It's undeniable that it's hard. You fight against it a bit because I think it's critical for any entrepreneur to separate himself or herself from the company. But in the end, well, it's so hard that you have to tell yourself, okay, it's not you that are failing, it's the company, right? But in the end, you feel in debt with your investors, and it's very hard to say what I'm saying here. Okay, you have learned, it was worth it, and yeah, you haven't failed, but the company has failed, and it was a project that you decided to dedicate yourself, and that investors have bet on, right? So it was hard. It took some weeks to internalize that and overcome this feeling of debt, and then deciding to communicate to the investors, okay, we are shutting down. We decided we are shutting down. We are not finding another way. And then their reaction speaks so much to this. They were worried about me personally, about my co-founders personally, right? They were not worried about, oh, you're losing my money, which is what we worry about when we're about to tell them, right? Because this is part of the game, right? So as an investor, this is part of the game. As a founder, this is part of the game. And having this consciousness is really important so that the journey is healthy, okay? Otherwise, it may be so stressful and so destructive mentally that it wouldn't be worth.
If you go back, would you still move forward with Pannacotta?
If I knew the answer to how to make it successful, then we would have gone forward, right? And we didn't know the answer. It's hard to say. I can't say I regret anything, and I think it's an important lesson for life. You can't regret. You have to look at your past, learn from it, honor it, and then look forward and use what you've learned, but not live with regret, right? So I don't regret doing anything I did. I think we gave our best. We dedicated almost 2 years of our lives to these problems and trying to solve these problems. And we learned a lot in the process. Not enough to really solve it, because it's a really very hard problem to solve, a big problem. So I would do it again in the sense that I don't regret. I wouldn't choose to solve this problem from now on. I don't know what's the next problem I'm going to choose to solve, but what I stick to is this lessons learned, everything I've learned from all these experience. How can I use it for my future, and how can I share it to the world and to the ecosystem to help other founders and other companies, and both avoid falling into the same traps and dealing with the same problems, and to have other better, more successful paths.
Fernando, what are the biggest lessons then you learned from having this journey?
Well, that's a good question, because from the practical side, for other founders, for example, I would say it is try to begin without code. So try to create really a minimum viable product. There are so many tools and platforms you can build on to test the concept, to test the demand, to test how the customers will react. And there's also generative AI to code for you. So the second iteration we did of the product, we built with no code and using AI to code a little bit. We built that in 2 weeks compared to the 6 months we took for the first iteration. So this is the practical lesson that I'm giving every other founder I've talked to, right? And I'm also teaching other companies how to do it, because it shouldn't, but it's a rare knowledge. So from the practical standpoint, that's the lesson I would give. From the most philosophical, for example, I would say that is this enjoy the journey, right? I think it is very stressful to be an entrepreneur. You're investing all your time, which is your most valuable asset, chasing a big results that financially may come, or most probably will not come 6, 7, 8, 10 years later, right? So it doesn't make sense. If you do the math, it doesn't make sense if you don't enjoy the journey. So you have to enjoy the failures, you have to enjoy the pleasures, you have to enjoy the stressful moments, understanding that you're there for it, right? You're there to learn, you're there to go through these challenges, and you're becoming a better person. And this shouldn't be such a stressful journey. And you can only do that if you decide to enjoy it, even when it's stressful. That's the most important lesson for other founders, I would say.
Do you plan to start any new ventures or new startups next?
Well, when I sold my first company, I created a kind of a holding. I call it Tali Ventures after my name. That is a kind of a vehicle for my adventures, right? So whether I decide to invest in other companies as I did, whether I decide to start my own projects or consulting or lectures or whatever. So I'm coming back to it. In the short term, I'm going to use it to offer my knowledge as a service. I don't know exactly how, but I'm testing a few formats, right? I think in the midterm, I love to build things and I love to build companies. And I really believe that being an entrepreneur and building a company is maybe the best vessel to take your potential to the world and change the world, right? At least that's the best vessel I can use. I'm not a big musician, so music would be another one. I'm an amateur writer, so the building a company, I think it is the best vessel. So I wouldn't say I won't build. I probably will, maybe more than one, but that's not what I'm doing right now. I have to gather more energy and inspiration and everything. So right now I'm offering my knowledge, all these learnings to the ecosystem to give back in a way.
You have several startup journeys. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's very much like the one I just did, because my first entrepreneurial journey, I was so stressed. I went through an anxiety crisis. I was so focused on the business that I was shutting down my relationship with my kids that were the most important thing for me at the time. So I was, every time, for example, my baby born was sleeping, grabbed my laptop and started working. I didn't really need to be working. I was looking for something to do, right? Because I thought that I had to, because I was entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs work all the time. So I think the lesson would be to seek balance and having moments of introspection and enjoying the life as a whole. That will give you perspective, that will help you a lot as an entrepreneur. So enjoying the whole journey, trying to have some balance and enjoying life, because it doesn't come back and actually goes by very fast. So it doesn't make sense not to enjoy.
Fernando, thank you very much for your sincere feedback and insights and sharing your journey and learnings in this startup with us and also other entrepreneurs. I think it will be very valuable for all the founders who listen to you, probably get great learnings and experiences from your story.
Thank you, Barak. It was my pleasure. I really learned a lot from other founders and professionals that helped me along the way. And it's my pleasure. And it speaks a lot to my purpose to help them, to empower them, and to give them autonomy and freedom not to make the same mistakes I did. Right. So it was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.